Hello and welcome back to another Giant Slayer TFT ranked meta video. Our analysts are here to go through the ranked meta patch for 12.1. We'll be covering meta for items, augments, compositions, and the general look of each stage of the game. Got a lot to talk about, so let's go ahead and get started. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helps make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come. Be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. Let's first look over the opening carousel as well as a look into the meta items for patch 12.1. There are multiple ways to look at the current patch, but the overarching theme is flexible play. Playing flexible is a bit of a loose term, but in general we're talking about being able to pivot from one board to another depending on what items you have and which champions you hit while rolling. Items play a huge factor because it's exceedingly difficult to pivot from AD to AP if all you have are a bunch of swords, bows, and gloves. So the easiest breakdown of the flex meta is whether you're going to end up with an AP board or an AD board. Luckily, there are a lot of viable carries, so no player is ever stuck playing just one composition unless they're intent on hard forcing a specific build. When it comes to AD items, the biggest flex items are Last Whisper, Giant Slayer, and Infinity Edge. These three items can be used by practically any AD champion such as Yone, Fiora, Urgot, Jhin, Shaco, Samira, and a few others. Last Whisper is often a must-have to deal with all the heavy armored frontliners, though Giant Slayer is a close second depending on the lobby. AP items, on the other hand, are a bit complicated. Blue buff has had a major resurgence in usage since they gave it a 50 starting mana buff, but a mana item isn't always needed. Two Socialite or multiple Scholars, for example, can provide enough mana regen to offset a lack of mana generating items. That said, most AP champions will do fine with blue buff, so it's never bad to have. This is where it gets a bit off the rails for AP items because there's Archangels, Jeweled Gauntlet paired with Infinity Edge, multiple Chalices, Deathcap, Giant Slayer, and even Morellonomicon is still used often. There's really no best in slot as it mainly depends on what components you've found throughout the game. That said, slamming multiple Chalices has become common as it helps alleviate any AP problems your board may have. Thus leading us to the question, which components are high priority on the opening carousel? Depends a lot on player preference, but if you want to play flex, look for a glove, bow, chain vest, or belt. Those components build into a lot of generally useful items like Infinity Edge, Giant Slayer, Bramble Vest, Warmogs, Morellonomicon, or Sunfire Cape. If you're leaning more towards a specific style of play, then Sword is great for AD boards, and Tear is a must-have for AP. Once again, the only component being left out is Cloak, though it can at least be used for items like Chalice. As for which items to slam early in the game, defense usually works best since they can be used by any composition. But you can commit to either AP or AD early on if you want, since there are plenty of options for both styles. All in all, there's plenty of leeway when it comes to the early game items and components, and players won't have to commit to anything until after Wolves. With items covered, let's move on to each stage of the game, beginning with stage 1 in the early game. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this stage because, as always, the main goal is to find pairs and look for cohesive synergies. The only important bits of information are whether you hit early Yordles or Mercenaries. If you have either of those traits active, play them because they are the easiest way to guarantee a strong mid-game. Otherwise, look for the strongest possible board you can play going into stage 2, as there's no major benefit to going on a loss streak right now besides slightly better econ and having priority in the carousel. What we do need to spend time on, though, is the 1/4 augment. The general idea behind picking your first augment is to aim for generally useful augments that either benefit you right away or in the long term. That means the majority of trait-specific augments or any heart, emblem, or soul augments are rarely the best option. But there are times when it can be useful, such as a mercenary heart to have the trait active on 2/1, or taking a trait augment that provides a free unit or extra gold. It's all situational, but generally, they should be avoided on 1/4. So what is good? Gold, experience, efficient shops, universal buffs. Any augment that fits under those conditions is going to be useful, but the actual best option depends entirely on your preferences and knowledge of the meta. Of course, there are a few augments you will always take if given the option, such as Windfall or Trade Sector, but overall you should have at least 1 or 2 solid augment choices to choose from on 1/4. Let's now continue on into stage 2. As mentioned earlier, if you can have Yordles or Mercenaries at this point, do so. Yordles are free gold generation throughout stage 2 and 3, which in conjunction with a loss streak is a lot of extra gold. Of course, ideally you want to win rounds, but Yordles are relatively weak early on unless you're high rolling them in your shop, so plan to lose. Mercenary is the same, but not because the units are weak. Gold Mercenary is to lose to gain better loot each round and cash out sometime between 7 and 10 losses depending on what your loot chest has. Speaking of, keep a tally of what loot you get each round as you may be able to cash out earlier instead of sacking more health. If you have neither of those traits, then make your game plan revolved around winning and saving health. Loose streaking without Yordles or mercenaries won't do a whole lot, especially because any mercenary player is going to try their hardest to guarantee they keep a loss streak going, so maintaining 5 losses in Stage 2 can be difficult. Play the strongest board you can based around your components, but you should slam at least one item to boost your board strength and what traits you have active. Leveling is also key to pushing your board advantage on 2-1. If you're for sure not aiming to lose, level to 4 and level once again on 2-5. While it doesn't guarantee a win, pushing levels at least puts you on par or ahead of the rest of the lobby and gives you a better chance of hitting higher cost units. Into the mid game we go with Stage 3. Stage 3 can be tricky because unlucky players that took a lot of losses in Stage 2 will need to roll a bit on level 6 to stabilize. But high roll players can breeze through it with no problem, so the lobby ends up being a bit split at this point of the game. Plus, this is where Yordles and mercenaries begin to kick in with their economy, which can swing games as well. To begin with, level to 6 on 3-2 or 3-1 if possible, unless you're playing Yordles or mercenaries. In that case, level when you can, but mostly commit to continuing to build your economy and loss streak. Yordle players can always push levels in Stage 3 with their superior econ and begin win streaking. It mostly just depends on how much gold they have and the strength of the other players in the lobby. After leveling, either roll if your board is weak and needs to stabilize, or keep chilling and build up your economy for a better level 7. The other important decision for Stage 3 is, of course, the 3-3 augment. The 3-3 augment is where you can be a bit more specific with your choices. While players won't know exactly what composition they'll end up with, they should have some idea whether it will be AP or AD. That means it's fine to aim for more specific augments that pertain to traits like Broken Stopwatch or Sniper's Nest on Jhin, and even niche augments like Lifelong Learning. While gaining additional gold is alright, most of the time it's better to pick up an augment that either buffs your board now or later. Basically, traits with power and not economy. Economy-related augments can still be amazing, but keep in mind that if you're always taking the economic option, you won't have the extra bonuses and stats that other players may have later on from their augments. That does mean generic buffs can be good pickups at this stage, like cybernetic implants, makeshift armor, or celestial. All of it really depends on your current board, what composition you may be leaning towards, and what information you've gained from scouting the lobby. Let's now move into Stage 4. It's leveling time, as the majority of the lobby should be hitting level 7. Mercenary players should also have cashed out by now, or they're going to be cashing out in the next round or two, as they will be low on health. But everyone else's goal is to level and roll a little bit of gold if necessary. Many players that have a stable board won't roll much, especially if they keep winning on Stage 4. Most players can aim to level to 8 as early as 4-2 to gain a better 4-cost odds and have a higher chance of finding a 5-cost champ. But most players won't have that luxury and instead need to roll at least some gold to find a few 4-costs or upgrade their 3-costs to build a board around. This is also where it will be necessary to commit towards either AP or AD, as the bulk of your guaranteed components will have dropped. Before we talk about the next augment, let's first go over a few of the meta comps. For low-cost boards, there's not many in the meta right now. While Yordles is playable as a composition, it's rarely going to do well unless the player high-rolled, so don't overcommit to 6 Yordle unless you're able to quickly 3-star the units. Katarina and Assassins also made a minor comeback, but aren't all that consistent, so be wary about forcing it. 3-cost carries are a bit more flexible, such as Samir with Challenger Imperial or Shaco with Syndicate Assassin. Imperial is entirely based around finding all for 1 and an emblem to hit 5 Imperial, otherwise it's not really worth playing. Syndicate is a very strong composition right now, but you either need to commit to 3-starring Shaco or start looking for a Kali. Either way, you do need 7 Syndicates for this board to shine. Then there's 4-cost boards like Jhin Sniper, Challenger, Arcanist, and Chemtech Bruiser. A lot of these are AD boards, meaning that you can flex the items between them very easily, so you're not completely forced to commit to one build in Stage 4. Arcanist is the primary AP comp, though there are a few niche builds like Seraphine Carry, Orianna Carry, and Lifelong Learning with a Scholar Carry. We'll talk about 5-cost later, but we've covered most of the meta comps. Keep in mind there's plenty of ways to play the current meta, so don't get caught up on forcing only 1 or 2 builds. The most important thing to keep in mind is a strong front line, usually with a Braum or Scion, and flex into whatever carry you're able to 2-star. Time now for the 4-6 augment. This augment is all about what directly boosts your current board strength. This means economy is rarely helpful, so stick to anything related to your current traits or buffs to your carry. Overall, this augment is one of the most dependent upon the state of the game, including your board and the rest of the lobby. This means that there is no definitive best augment. As we said, stick to picking an augment that gives your board some type of an advantage. If you haven't been scouting much beforehand, then scout. The final augment is important information to have, as well as knowing what 3 augments every player has. And finally, we're into the late game. For the most part, the late game is easy. Level to 8 preferably early on in Stage 5, upgrade your board, and depending on your board state and economy, you either have to keep rolling each round to survive, or you can slowly make your way to level 9. Add in 5 costs that are relevant to your board and focus on scouting and positioning. As for specific 5 costs, Tahm, Kench, and Yuumi are the best all-around champions to play in the late game. Ideally, you want Kench earlier to begin feeding him, but the fact that you can farm extra golden components is insanely helpful. That said, he may be more difficult to fit into your composition than Yuumi is, since Yuumi can literally be added into any comp. Some builds do play around the 5 costs like Kai'Sa and Akali, but keep in mind to use those champions as a carry, you need good items for them and 2-star them. As Stage 5 progresses, having 1-star 5-cost carry will not be enough, and you will begin bleeding health. So make sure you're in a good spot to commit to a 5-cost before doing so. What you really should be focusing on in the late game is scouting and repositioning. Besides that, a lot of the game is decided earlier on in the game, so getting better at Stage 2, 3, and 4 will almost always have more of an impact than a lot of the late game will. That's it for today's video, folks. Overall, the meta for patch 12.1 has been quite enjoyable with so many viable ways to play the game. Hopefully the next patch doesn't shake up the meta too much, since it's in a good spot currently. Let us know in the comment section below what you've enjoyed the most in 12.1. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.